But this week, I chose the lore. And if you want to hear any sort of lore, what you could do is you can go into the Discord, and once a week, Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, we'll ask a question. First person to get the question right gets to pick the lore for the week. I pick the lore for this week. It is on FEV. FEV is an artificial virus created by West Tech's NBC division. Now, when I was on the wiki, I was looking up, I get all of my lore off of fandom, fallout.fandom.com, and when I was looking for what NBC stood for, I knew it wasn't like the national broadcasting company, but I have no clue what it was. It wasn't there, so I don't have it written down. It has the ability to force change in both pheno and genotype. Many a different organization has used this before and after the Great War. The strain that created the Mariposa supermutants, or Masters mutants, is FEV2, which we'll get into a little bit later. A different unused version is used on the East Coast, infesting the Capital Wasteland. These mutants are inferior to West Coast mutants, which I'll get into a little bit later. They explain it a little bit. Capital Wasteland FEV, and maybe I'm biased, the first person to say that I'm biased towards Fallout 3, makes more sense to me than... Actually, you know what? Boston's makes sense to me too. I wish it was kind of expanded upon a bit more. 76 doesn't. 76 just doesn't. I refuse to believe 76 is. It just seems like, hey, this is recognizable. But at least there's no jet, right? Other strains created Appalachian mutants and various other monsters in the state. They use a slightly different strain for the Commonwealth mutants, and FEV is also used in Gen 3 since. FEV was used in both the Master and the Enclave's plan to purify the world. Now, when I was doing this, I never really put two and two together and thought that FEV was used for the ending of Fallout 1 and Fallout 2, and it made me think maybe I'm a little too harsh on Fallout 4's ending. I just feel like Fallout 4's ending is a little too like, Liberty Prime is back, where it's like FEV is back, but we're using it differently. They're not so much using Liberty Prime differently. I don't know, maybe I'm just getting older and less cynical. So the next part I want to read directly off the wiki because I wanted to make sure I got it right, and after I read pretty much all of it, it seemed like one of those things that I just kind of needed to have in front of me just to make sure that I was doing my due diligence and doing the article itself justice. This is Virology, directly off fallout.fandom.com. FEV is a megavirus with a protein sheath reinforced by ionized hydrogen. It is capable of absorbing neutrons without becoming radioactive, i.e. it cannot be sterilized by radiation. In terms of functionality, FEV is a shifting abruptive virus, copying DNA patterns and storing these patterns in exons much like a retrovirus. These exons combined with the FEV are re-injected into the host cell in typical viral infectious fashion. This causes the host cells to regenerate their DNA with FEV corrections that eradicated recessive genes. FEV comes preloaded with introns of corrective DNA that eradicates recessive genes responsible for ailments and alters RNA strands for greater transmissions of signals. DNA altered by the virus renders the subject immune to biochemical weapons, radiation, and common diseases. Cellular division rate is increased with mitosis occurring at 115% of the normal human rate. Normally, non-regenerative tissue, such as neutral tissue, and non-somatic cells also begin to replicate, allowing for real-time regeneration. FEV is also highly corrosive and volatile in its pure form, capable of degrading rubber condiment seals like acid, though without any acidic residue. This also renders attempts at creating an effective documentation process difficult, as FEV would render most compounds inert before they could neutralize the virus. the virus, eventually combining a booster with an antiviral compound created a neutralizing agent capable of rendering FEV inert while applied in significant quantities. Now that was just kind of like the base of how it gets pushed around and how it gets shared and what its effects are. So I really wanted to make sure I had that correct. I will be going back to my notes now. FEV relies on replicant DNA. It's unpredictable. What's so unpredictable about it is that you could throw anybody into it, and depending on their genes and their level of radiation, which I think I get into a little bit more later, you never really know what you're going to get. Centaurs are original centaurs. I don't know about East Coast, but West Coast centaurs are a mixture of like cats and dogs and people that were just kind of thrown into the vats of goo. Most tweaking of the FEV strain would only produce a few viable subjects. Only a few people would actually be able to do things and not be giant Tommy Pickleses and like walk around and like smash things and try to fix things with tools that like wasn't really doing anything. Prolonged exposure to the virus can produce some amazing transformation, like super mutants and centaurs. Now centaurs are kind of broken and dumb and stupid and silly because they don't really work. But at the same time, that's really cool to have like 6 arms, and that's how you drag yourself, and a tentacle mouth, and a kitten in your rectum. I just think that's kind of fun. Mariposa has achieved this with 24-hour FEV2 exposure. In Vault 87, contaminants took place in isolated chambers. When I get to the strains, I kind of talk about how the strains affected people differently. And we'll get into that a little bit later. In Appalachia and the Institute, subjects were put into tubes, exposed, allowing transformation to become observed. So, you know, you just kind of walked around Mariposa and you constantly had this, like, cancer, for lack of a better word, even though it wasn't cancerous as far as I know, being beamed into you. Where in 3, it's like, and then that's it. And then in Appalachia and in the Institute, which again, MIT, CIT, it makes sense a little bit to me. You're in a tube and kind of just, I think you get to see the super mutants just like chilling like this. Cool. Injections of FEV can be used to induce a variety of changes. Early in the days of the Unity, the Master would do this and later experimented with brain injections, and this then gave him Psycher powers. Now, I don't have it written down here. There is a couple more things I want to read off the wiki, and I'll get into the Psychers in some time. The Enclave would use FEV to greatly increase the intelligence of Death Claws, and this was an overshot by a wide margin of what they wanted. I've talked about it on here before. There is that one. I want to talk about him. I can't remember his name. I should have wrote it down. He's a Death Claw that's like sentient and not a moron and wears a cape. He kind of looks like Quasimodo from that old Disney movie. Quasimodo or the Hunchback, and he wears like, and he kind of sounds like Peter Lorre. He doesn't, I don't know. Now, to reverse FEV, with pre-war tech, it is impossible to reverse the changes of FEV. There is no backup copy of old DNA. So what it does is it takes your DNA, pretty much reassembles it, and now you're a big green man. And you're stronger, and if you're lucky, you're smarter, but sometimes you're not. The one Dr. Brian Virgil created a serum to reverse the mutagen. It technically doesn't reverse the mutation. It resequences the DNA back to the way it originally was. You would retain some muscle mass and not suffer from baldness if you were to be reversed. But the serum that's created is really just keeping Virgil in mind. So they don't really know. Virgil doesn't really know. The Institute doesn't really know. Nobody really knows how far the serum could really go. Now, for the strains, there's FEV1. Initial use was a bioweapon. In July of 2236, the Enclave found the research for it being a bioweapon in the depths of the Mariposa military base, and they would take this strain and turn it into FEV curling 13, which is what they want to use to kill all the mutants. FEV2, this was tested by West Tech and much more researched and was done to be made safer. And I say safer with quotations because you're not turning into one of the X-Men. You're turning into the Hulk. For someone to be turned into a super soldier by FEV2, you needed to have a low amount of radiation inside of your body. There's something about the way the radiation reacts with the FEV that then turns you into something else. Any subject to not be healthy enough would suffer massive organ failure and die incredibly painful. Vree, a Brotherhood scribe, autopsied a super mutant. It was I shout out the UK, love you guys. It's 3.2 meters tall, or 10 foot 7 inches, 363 kilograms, or 801 pounds. Muscle mass, the entire body of a super mutant was comprised of 77.41% muscle mass. Bone mass was 10.23%, tissue was 9.34%, and fat was 3.02%. And I did do the math, and that does equal 100. They become more hunched over to compensate for the muscle mass, and they have gray-greenish skin. As they age, it becomes more of an olive tone, like Mediterranean people. It's thicker skin that becomes more resilient to cuts, fire, acid, and gunfire, and what have you. It pretty much is like the skin on the bottom of your foot on your entire body. Completely destroyed tissue stays destroyed. I have written here, they do not have Wolverine's healing factor. Super mutants are also sterile. Mariposa FEV has a chance to raise intelligence, but most will lose up to 30% of their intel. Super mutants can live much longer than humans and are pretty much immune to all common diseases. Now, EEP is the strain of FEV that's in the capital wastes. It's used in Vault 87, and testing began in 2078 and has different growth subjects. Now, subjects are exposed to a one-time dose of EEP with an aerosol spray. When you see those chambers in 87, what you're seeing pretty much is they would put them inside of this chamber or this vault, and they would go tss, tss, with this aerosol spray, and then it would just kind of mutate them. Changes would occur within 3 days: increased muscle mass, change in skeletal structure, atrophy of sexual characteristics. That includes hair. It's kind of why all super mutants look like androgynously male. They don't have breasts. They're eunuchs. I'm assuming that, like, their meat falls off or shrivels up or goes inside of them or something. Oh, I have a lot of questions all of a sudden. Do they all just have holes there? They don't grow hair, but pubic hair is like a defensive thing. Like an evolutionary defensive thing to keep like dirt and muck and grime and gunk. I have so many questions. I know that you can't take the clothes off them. Not that I mean, at 10 days, the skin yellows and toughens. By day 14, test subjects become almost feral. Even though they have severe mental degradation, they can still speak, operate machines, and use basic combat techniques. They pretty much become insane. If they don't die for too long, that's such a shitty way I wrote that, they can become the size of a small building. Behemoths. The Institute strains, completely different from all other strains. They gain all the body modifications of the West Coast. They gain all the body mods of the other, and they have average intelligence. Some of them can actually use simple traps. All Commonwealth mutants are a result of Institute meddling. This work is what was used in synth research. Now, I know I kind of wanted to focus on the super mutants, so I could do this.
Super mutant wants spines. Super mutant wants stability. Super mutant wants love.
I'm going to get kicked out of my place. But I wanted to talk about the synths because I think the synths are really interesting. I wish, again, they would have been expounded upon more. I wish Fallout 4 had another year and a half of development. I know, I'm an old man who likes to bitch. Sean's pre-war DNA was mixed with heavily modified FEV, allowing them to create a generation of synths of various different sexes and races and body types. This research took place from 2178 to 2224. 49 years for the some Gen 3 synths don't even see themselves as humans because they don't need to drink or eat, and also they are not born but they are built and then implanted with the fake memories and what have you. Then there's the Huntsville strain of Huntsville, West Virginia. In a West Tech lab in Huntsville, West Virginia, they contaminated the river with a special strain of FEV as an experiment. Similar to Mariposa and Institute mutants, increase muscle, they can build armor, they can build fortifications. These also can develop into the behemoths, much like in DC and Boston. It also kind of explains, and I'm going to get into a little bit now, but it also explains like the other monsters that you can find in Appalachia. There's FEVS 006443 from October 14th of 2077, a phase 2 combination strain that combined traits that resembled a number of different species. This is then what led to the Snallygaster. There's FEVS-006458 on October 23rd, 2077, in the year of our Lord. Tweaking the Snallygaster strain, researchers tweaked the genome, producing a giant that shattered the containment unit. Albino mole rats. Before the destruction of the West Tech Research Facility, lab rats were exposed to FEV. The turmoil of the facility's destruction, they escaped into the wastes. The Psycher Program. Now, I want to read into this one a little bit. Apart from transforming humans into super mutants, the Master and his staff experimented with FEV by injecting it into the brains of the subjects, usually the pineal gland, but also the amygdala and the medulla. Triggering changes in brain chemistry. These experiments had limited success. 4 extremely powerful psychers were created, capable of theoretically wiping out the human race, but that is non-canon. However, the same changes that increase psychic ability also result in terminal insanity, forcing them to be suggested and nullified to prevent them from harming themselves or others. I talked about FEV culling 13, and I've talked about that a little bit in the past. There's also modified culling 13, intelligent death claws. In 2235, the Enclave began experimenting on captive death claws to create expandable stock of troops for their use. The recovery from the FEV for Mariposa allowed them to create a tailored mutagen that increased the intelligence of Deathclaws after localizing injections, making them capable of understanding and following complex commands, as well as communications. FEV was synthesized and used by Weston Lesko in the Capital Wasteland around 2277 in an attempt to return giant ants to their normal size. That's so dope. This is the them quest, but I don't remember that. That's really dope. There's Gator Claws, the Gator Claws which inhabit the Savari Adventure portion of the Raider Stronghold of Nuka World in 2287. Are genetically engineered hybrids of the Jackson chameleon and the alligator, which were created with the aid of the Institute strain of the FEV by ghoul scientist Dr. Darren McDermott. I should do something on Nuka World soon. Hey guys, suggest Nuka World, that'll be fun. There's like FEV batch 10-011, batch 11-01, batch 10-11, the beginning of FEV in West Tech, started in 2075. They were done on single-cell organisms. While their base metabolism appeared unchanged, their immunity to infection and radiation exceeded all early expectations. Research on FEV effects on plants provided unsuccessful. The next stage included flatworms injected on May 9th of 2075. They exhibited a 28% increase in size and resistance to 9 separate vital cognogens within hours. Batch 11-01, the new virus batch, featured improved metabolic cycle efficiency by a factor of 43%. As part of the test, 53 raccoons were infected with the new strain. Why raccoons? Why? On January 26th of 2076, along with the expected size increase, behavioral tests confirm an increase in intelligence and manual dexterity by 19 points. In February, the West Tech facility in Appalachia joined the FEV research effort, ordering to begin human experimentation in order to push FEV to its practical limits. February, the water supply experiment started in February of 2076, providing valuable research data for the project. Further developments occurred after several new gene sequences supplied by Mayor Bennett's advisory team were spliced into FEV batch 11-01. Batch 11-111. A new hybrid batch was designated 11-111 on October 4th of 2076, and it was used to infect 15 chimps. Raccoons, chimps. Despite protests from the team, on January 7th of 2077, FEV research in California was transferred to the Mariposa military base to continue under the lead of Leon von Felder and Robert Anderson. Batch 111 has been chosen as the basis for further development through the human experimentation. The batch offered a near 100% success rate on lab animals, granting an approximate 60% size increase and potential 200% intelligent increase. That's about it. There's some other stuff. It's a lot of like nitty gritty stuff. So that's about it. That's everything I really have to say about FEV. That is lore.